Oh, I think it's recording.
If it's blinking.
Yep, it's recording.
Should we stop it and try again?
That's fine.
Okay.
All right, this is post 4.
Woohoo!
I'm Molly.
I'm Emma. Elisa.
Mackenzie. All right, here we go.
So we read the Academic Engagement and Achievement of Latino Youth article and found that immigrant youth have a lot of disadvantages in schools.
Yeah. I read the part that talked about, I don't know how to say the names, Plyler versus Doe, which made it unconstitutional for anyone to deny education to undocumented alien students. And it was just talking about like that the laws were set in place for the protection of information for the students and their families, so that when students like go to school, they don't like risk being like outed, I guess, for like their documentation status. And it helps, but that it was talking about there's still like a lot of problems. But that helped because it made it so that students were more able to go to school. Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how it said that children shouldn't be punished by their parents' decision to immigrate illegally by being not able to go to school.
Yeah. And was it in the same one that talked about college? I can't remember if it was in this one or not, but it was talking about how like secondary education for students who don't have their like documentation, they're like really excited to do the secondary education, then they don't get to because they don't have the right like papers or like.
Or they can't pay for it.
Yeah, and there's just like all these different things, like they can't get scholarships and they like all these different things. And I had never thought about that before, and so it was like, oh, your education really does like stop when you like hit high school because you can't, like there's not a possibility of that.
Yeah, without a social security number and to not get financial aid, and I thought it was, I'm losing my train of thought. But I did click on one link that was at the bottom. Did you guys see the Freedom University in Georgia, where it's a school entirely for undocumented youth?
Oh.
And the tuition is free, and it didn't say a whole lot on their webpage, but I don't know, they're in Georgia, and since Georgia is one state where you don't get the in-state tuition cost, or I don't know, it seems like a confusing thing to navigate if you're an undocumented youth and going through all these struggles and then having to go through this crazy path to try and get to college. But because what is it, so that one student in our last one in Florida, she could go to community college and get in-state tuition.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, they have like a special program for undocumented students.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so this whole school is for that in Georgia.
Huh.
Cool. I wonder how it's funded.
I was wondering that too, because it's probably not a state school, probably not federal.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Interesting.
I talked about how the article informs the way I think about community access mapping by showing how many factors support the growth of a student, like the things that they can access in their community, like a library, or their parents and their parents' education level and English abilities, as well as their teachers and their school funding.
That was kind of goes into my section was about academic engagement and disengagement, which it has 3. So the factors that lead to either engagement or disengagement were family risk, including parents' level of education, poverty, family structure, citizenship status, like what their neighborhood's like, and a few other things. Yeah, and just like what's around them. And it was this the article that was the Bronfenbrenner ecological theory, or was that the next article? 'Cause they kind of go and really run into each other a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that was the other one. Let's see.
So what I read was like the academic, so the first article was the academic engagement and achievement of Latino youth, like specifically talking about the Latino culture. And they just found that a lot of immigrant youths were healthier than their non-immigrant youth families, and when they came to the States, they started, when they were younger and they came, then they wouldn't succeed as well because they would come into the mainstream sort of, and they had the mindset of people around here do, not, some people don't care as much, and so the longer the immigrant youths were in the US, they became less they had less emotional support, or less bad health, and they just didn't have as many opportunities, so they couldn't really do much.
Yeah.
That was really surprising to me, and part of it makes you wonder if it's just them just the internalized depression, because so many immigrants must have better access to healthcare and education than where they were from.
Yeah.
So why is it going down? It's I mean, the only thing I
Oppression.
it's just that they're really internalizing what other people, or the social mirroring, I think was one of them, and they're kind of unfortunately doing a self-fulfilling prophecy of.
I thought it was interesting because I was reading and it was talking about how migrant worker, the migrant worker population, and it was talking about how affected those families of migrant workers are, how they are affected, because a lot of the children, the parents will work longer hours or are working out in the fields, and the pesticides are really affecting the health. So I don't know if that actually connects, but it was just making me think of the health of immigrants and migrant workers, and how they have to work longer, and then they're being affected by these pesticides, which is hurting their health. And sometimes, a lot of the times it was talking about how the kids are in the fields with the parents because it is longer hours, or they need more work. So they have the kids work, and it said that the infant mortality rate among migrant workers is 125% higher than the general population, which blew my mind that was happening.
I wonder if parents are afraid to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Probably.
With babies.
Yeah. I think the United States has one of the highest infant mortality rates of industrialized nations. But yeah, I would say that, especially in certain states. I mean, I can't speak for everywhere, but in Washington State, I think undocumented pregnant women qualify for pregnancy benefits from Medicaid and can get prenatal care and go to the hospital and
Is that a
get
state by
services.
state thing, or is that federal?
So it's state by state, but it's federal money that the states decide.
Yeah.
So our state Medicaid program expanded when we chose to do the Affordable Care Act. But unfortunately, in Republican states, they didn't do that. So, which is really crazy that it's a red state, blue state issue. It's killing children, and so I don't know what other states' policies are, but I believe the state chooses how to allocate the funds, but it's federal money. Kind of.
I remember last week we read about one of the kids, and her mom had, either it was this week or last week, had her in a house because she was too afraid to go to the hospital to have the baby, which probably was really hard.
Yeah.
That's all I had for that article. Well, I mean, there was more, but.
I also talked about how neighborhoods, all the immigrants' families tend to go to the same neighborhood, which is really interesting because they want to like be around people that they like know and where it's cheaper, so they can actually like pay for housing and stuff, and that kind of just creates a community where the kids don't necessarily get to learn English in the community because they're all like the same. So I thought that was really interesting that like they're comfortable in that, but it's not necessarily like a good thing when it comes to learning English because they don't have as many opportunities for that, and then through that they can't get some jobs, and it's harder to get in colleges if they don't have that exposure.
And then the schools are more impoverished
Yeah.
since it's
Mm-hmm.
based on the
Lower income.
yeah, lower
families.
income areas.
Yeah, okay, you want to move on to the next article?
So I talked about the different kinds of documentation styles in this article, Growing Up in the Shadows. There's like 4 main kinds. One of them is unauthorized, which makes up like 20% of people in the world are unauthorized migrants, which I thought was really interesting because that's a lot, and I feel like there's a lot more that I know of. Like, I don't have many friends who know people like this, but most of them.
Well, I think it's saying 5% of the United States.
Yeah. I said 20% in the world, but yeah, 5% in the.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so unauthorized immigrants are those who live in the country without legal authorization to do so, and they don't have visas, and they aren't permitted admission under the rules of like long-term residency or working permits. So for them, it's really harder to find like secure jobs and things like that. And when they have